Yeah, the stream last night was a fucking trip. It was entertaining, insightful, a clusterfuck, all of the above. I hope it's not weird that I'm giving a positive review, But I think to summarize the core of the argument on politically provoked, it's the same thing that happened on the Luke Ford show. It's basically an argument of, this is going to be American centric, but it's basically an argument of what our country is, what it should be, what it was when it was founded, between people who have a more inclusive picture and people that want to make it more exclusive. And basically what you have is a bunch of people who are dissatisfied with the country, are disgruntled, and it seems like a lot of these people that are on this show who feel this way have come to view the Jews as the cause of that. Now, I spent a lot of time talking with these people, trying to understand why that was the case. Kind of like Jonah, he looks a little bit dumbfounded talking to these people, because it does feel pretty creepy talking to someone who thinks you don't belong in the country, or worse, or whatever it is. Now, I do think these people are genuine, at least some of them. They're not just trolling. Like, they are hardcore believers. The question is why? Now, the more obvious kind of answer is these are people who are marginalized in some way by society, whether it's monetarily, with women, anything that has an effect on them. In my opinion, all anti-Semites are marginalized in one way or another, or disgruntled in one way or another. And I was thinking, well, Henry Ford was a billionaire, and he was one of the foremost anti-Semites, or like Father Coughlin. It's like, okay, well, he did well financially, but obviously he had a grievance somewhere else, whether it was the direction of the country that made him feel insecure, or something like this, So, that's what I mean. So, I mean, that's what the core of why they come to blame somebody. And the Jews have the longest history of being outsiders, or the other, in European history, and the world was dominated by Europe. So I think this largely explains it, but it's incomplete, right? It also serves a function, and that function is, in the United States and many other countries, we live in a pluralistic society from the founding. This is something I thought about, and I was watching some documentaries on the Constitution and how wondrous a document it is. That sounds cliche, but the whole development and everything is quite something, and obviously was a huge development. And it's just a really interesting story how flexible it is. But it took a lot of very different people. I mean, you could say, oh, they were all white men, and yeah, they were all white rich men, and they had that commonality. So you could say, oh, it wasn't a very diverse group, but this group was very different from each other. The states and the people were very different from each other. You had, Lutherans and Quakers living with Southern Baptists and the like, slaveholders and industrialists, very different regions. It was very different. And so at the core of our country, it has pluralism, and if you want to call it diversity, I don't really like that word as much. It's become so cliche. Built into the core of the country. And people that don't like that, obviously we're more diverse and pluralistic than we used to be. People that don't like that are looking for a way to to break that cohesion apart. And there's no better way to do that than to demonize a group. And Western culture, Western history has been largely dominated by white men and Jews, I would say, first and foremost. If you're not counting Jews as white, but it was dominated by mostly white Christians and Jews. So it's hard to say blame problems on non-whites that weren't as a part of that history, that weren't as ingrained into the power structure. So Jews have the longest tradition of being blamed as an other and an outsider by Western society. So the function it really serves, as I see, if you can demonize Jews and say they don't have a place in our society and they're the henchmen that are responsible for all of our problems, you really open the door to breaking apart this kind of cohesion or goodwill between groups. And if you can blame the Jews, well then what about black people? They pose a threat. If Jews pose a threat, well, what about black people? I mean, they're really scary, right? And crime rates. So if Jews are a threat, then they are too. But what about the southern invasion from Mexico? What about Hispanics? I mean, they're pretty scary too. They pose a threat. What about the gays? I mean, they're destroying marriage. What about the trannies? Don't even get me started with them. What about the Asians? You know, I read a Richard Lynn book, and it said that their genetics are different from ours. So I'm just going through, like, mocking kind of how they would think about this. But I spent a lot of time talking with these people because I was genuinely curious to understand their worldview. So yeah, I believe they don't like Jews, and they go through history and cherry pick all these events and try to blame them on them. But I think the deeper purpose is to bring down Western, pluralistic, multicultural, tolerant societies in order to create a system that is the opposite of that, that's more monocultural, more, what's the opposite of pluralistic? Singularistic. This is the main purpose, in order to create what, like a monarchy or a fascist type system. Because we're talking about marginalized people, and I'm not using that as an insult really, but just as a descriptor, people that feel insecure about the world, technology, others, outsiders, and this is their way to break that apart, however difficult that might be. But it can be quite toxic and really scare people. And you see the worst results of that in an event like El Paso, where a guy is literally willing to give up his life to stop this, quote, invasion of brown people. I'm sure he was radicalized online, as well as other similar examples. But yeah, that chat was really interesting last night. It's always hard to like get all your thoughts on a subject like this, especially when you're driving, putting your life at risk. Really interesting chat. You know, Jonah is probably the smartest guy in those, but like the blood sports are good. The legit conversation is really good. So even if it's a fiasco, I feel like the core issue that I've mentioned, like, it's really important and explains a lot of political struggle. I mean, it doesn't cover every subject, but if you want to say, like, it's basically insiders versus outsiders. White nationalists are saying we're the insiders, like we're the core of this nation, and there's all these outsiders that are a threat to us that are fucking it up, like all the groups I just mentioned. Now, are they arguing that like little fetuses are Americans and should be protected in that group? I don't know. maybe it doesn't quite expand to that, but I feel like what I've mentioned here explains a core of a lot of these issues. Kyle on the Luke Ford show, he was the host for a while, and he was constantly insulted, like, you're not a real American, you don't belong here, you're a subverter, blah, blah, blah. And they fit the facts to match this narrative. Like, blaming many horrific genocides in the past on Jews. And, like, you can factually explain how that's wrong and how that's false, but that's like, I don't know, that's like killing individual ants, whereas understanding why people do this, that's like spraying the whole house against ants or something like that. But I do find it funny how Norvin refers to me as a horrible person, and he's literally gone on streams and advocated for exterminating people. So it's the inversion that they partake in. Let me see. Final thoughts on this subject. I think I've explained it as well as I can for right now. But Politically Provoked is sweet. Hopefully it lasts. It's like such a clusterfuck. Once you get white nationalists and Wignats in there, it's like playing with nitroglycerin. But it is kind of weird talking to a Norvin or that other guy who seems almost even more hardcore or crazy. But it's an ideology that should be confronted, negated. There's multiple ways to do that, but if they are on stream, if they are being platformed, I think you should debate them. I think it's a duty to confront bad ideas when you think they're bad ideas. Anyway, I hope the stream wasn't too rambly. I'm just driving in the car. Anyway, everyone have a good night.